I've got a new picture that I have had for a while. Every time I have a good picture, when it works right, I have at least what I consider to be a good description to go with it. And several weeks ago I was mentioning to you in a somewhat picturesque manner of a calm in the middle of a vortex. But there is another one I have resisted for a long time of ever bringing this up. Some of you may be aware of the old mythological tales. One of them, or the one I'm about to refer to, is credited with the Chinese. Some 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, explained the universe as being the world sitting on top of a turtle, and that turtle staying on top of another turtle, and no matter what the questioner asked, like, well, what's supporting that second turtle? Well, he's staying on another turtle. And so you got it covered. Plus, insofar as the kind of thinking in that particular culture, there would be the possibility that a certain person here or there might suddenly be struck by something, that the answer was open-ended. That is, if someone was presenting themselves as being a religious teacher or a philosopher, that no matter what you said, that wait a minute, where's the last turtle standing? Well, he's standing on the back of another turtle. I'll get close to telling you, even though this may sound picturesque, that the perceivable universe, now by perceivable, I'm not going to drag this too far into apparently would-be scientific descriptions, although there is a basis that is more real, as I've been trying to get you to look towards, that if we were now given only the two possibilities of describing things as being, quote, scientific or, quote, religious, then the time is now upon us, as witnessed by you being here, in the pictures I see, the information that life is talking about to itself that's coming down to humanity's level now, that to mention the perceivable universe, I would first give you the short answer, is that is the three-dimensional universe. But as many of you know from your reading, given humanity's own conception of its own consciousness, you now have scientists, areas of the scientific field, that although they cannot say that personally they can perceive another universe, it is now getting to such a strange point that they theoretically come up with not only a three-dimensional universe, but a higher one. That even though there is no equipment, and even though the human senses cannot perceive it, they're now reaching points that the only reasonable explanations, the only reasonable theories must take into account added dimensions, whether they can be perceived or not. But at any given time, to speak of the perceivable universe, and I normally shorthand it, at least out in my few public appearances, and to you people sometimes, I just say the known universe. Just take it as being that. That is not the extent of it, which is why I was asking the question sometimes back, could you perceive another dimension? Just theoretically, what other dimension could there be? Because there, surely by now you see there obviously is. If for no other reason, where does this kind of information come out? Whether it be me right now, or whether it been somebody else 200 years ago at some other spot. Where did this come from? It didn't come from a book. And in a sense, I didn't make it up, but nobody told me about it. There is always another dimension going on, but the perceivable universe is that at any given time which the ordinary level of consciousness can conceive of, and that's it. No matter whether you try and describe it in mythological terms or religious terms or in scientific terms, there is a limit to what that contemporaneous line level of consciousness throughout the spectrum of humanity as a whole at that time, there is a limit to what it can perceive. And that's it. So my shorthand has normally been the known universe now, or sometimes 3D, the world of 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions if you want to throw in time. But consider now the perceivable universe as it's known through all methods. As I said, I've hesitated to say this, but I'll go ahead. It's a flying castle, except I will not entertain questions from anybody who's going to say, well, if the known universe is a flying castle, into what medium is it flying? If we're taking everything that exists, and it is indeed the known universe, if it is a flying castle, in what is it flying? Don't ask that. I guess somebody suspects there must be some perhaps minor reason for me to even bring this up, because I'm about to drop it, but it is a flying castle. All of it. Not the planet Earth. The whole universe is a flying castle. The only reason at all I brought it up was I was going to mention something else having to do with the vortex. And enough of you are getting close is why I keep dragging up and conjuring up these new descriptions, or giving you some that I had already seen a long time ago. It is something to hang your increasing perception on. As you see, but now it's not for you to adopt some description, or for me to say here is an absolute truth of some kind. Indeed, I make specific efforts to stop that from happening, as you note. The easiest way is to simply abandon some description. To abandon it and oftentimes wait several months and then come up with something else that some of you have voices that perhaps after a few times of me describing it and you going off and having your normal voices talk about it, will have voices that say, wait a minute, it sounds like a different description, but this is almost the opposite from what I thought that other thing that he mentioned 6 months ago. And I thought I had it sort of figured out that it made sense, and it was applicable. Inside, there is an area that is a quiet corridor. I did not draw out, but if you could imagine me drawing like somewhat like an architectural view, if we cut off a castle, a big structure, and we cut off the roof and we tilted a little bit, and you could see running down the middle of it, let us say, a long corridor, and on each side of the corridor would be, at least perceivably, an infinite number of rooms. All the rooms adjoin, and there are doors going from the corridor into the rooms. Enough of you are getting close that I'm, without involving myself in physically slapping and pulling magic, that you have got to see that there comes a necessity, and then it becomes somewhat of an ordinary state, that once you can begin to fire up areas of the nervous system that are not presently working, that were not intended to be ignited in humanity as a whole at this day and time, that the sorts of things that I have mentioned and all of you have read about, that supposedly throughout the ages mystical systems and religions have attempted to teach, or to at least proclaim their value, that is meditation, prayer, chanting, simply sitting, the old idea that in some way all this internal noise stops, or that in some way the unstilled waters of the human mind are calmed, and following that is eureka. I did not, as you well noted, started out with any of you saying this leads to a particular thing, or what it's getting to is to the point that you can calm the nervous system. From line level down, there is no question of calming the nervous system. If indeed you could calm it, I don't mean by several minutes, and I don't mean the moment of eureka, but if in some way you could calm the nervous system, and that was it, we're not discussing anything else, no more effort, you would have constructively destroyed the organism from its routine function inside the body of life. Notwithstanding the fact that many people, whether they be involved with attempted meditation or yoga or whatever, notwithstanding that many people would say, listen, I feel like I'm going crazy at times and I can almost identify it. I did not specialize or even study psychology, but it's my damn mind. I have these terrible nightmares, or I begin to sing one line of a song, and sometimes I'll sing it for 3 days non-stop. But I suddenly remember something my mother said to me when I was 7.5 years old, and it goes on and on and on. This is some kind of living hell if I could just stop that. Notwithstanding that the world was full of people that would come to that conclusion verbally if you led them in that direction, that is something to be gained if possible. But at the ordinary level it cannot be done, and it should not be done. That's why it can't be done. Those circuits are already doing at least a minimal amount of functioning inside life's corporation. Now, the real possibility that has been described throughout the ages of stilling the mind, of having some kind of clear insight, is one thing that I've been describing over and over in different ways for at least the last 2 years. It is literally igniting, bringing to life areas of the nervous system, specifically up here now, is where we all are. That's the extent, that's the hand of the nervous system. Life has not already routinely activated it. To get it activated, although this cannot be discussed at much length before the fact, to activate it requires that you do it. Of course, it seems like it's you and I doing it, and you and the whole group doing it. The point being, life out there is not going to do it. And all of you should have a very strong suspicion of that there was nobody to blame, and it is simply there is not ordinary activity. There is not ordinary information available in life through any ordinary source that will activate it. They talk about it, but now you should be able to hear that they're all talking about it, all the way from dope addicts to TV evangelists. Everyone's talking about it, as they should. But there is nothing in the ordinary flow of everyday life that will activate up here. To physically have areas of the brain to begin to be activated, what I'm trying to get you to perceive in a certain way, they have not been mechanically ignited. And it is there that there is a possibility of being conscious. I'm saying possibility as just a minimal word to you. I assume you understand I'm insinuating a lot more. But it is only there that they can be conscious, but not driven by static electricity. Just about all of you have had little moments of this already, to say the very least. It's like being conscious. It is the literal living reality of what you've always read about mystical experiences, although now I've about taken all the mysticism out of your sails. But you're certainly conscious, and it's as though all the voices stopped. It is as though you turn around, to use the time-honored expression, that you can turn around to your roomie, to someone you've known or lived with 10 years, and you suddenly look, and in a very real way, see, some other forces going on, as you have gone up here and you have produced a whole new mind. You have given birth to it, but its parents were not the same mechanical forces that produce the mind in you now. This quiet corridor is not me now describing some instantaneous once and for all new state of consciousness, but it's still the matter that for as long, I'm not going to predict with any of you. You can almost say the rest of your life you still continue to learn something. If you don't, I'll be the first to know it. The activities on either side, and you've got to picture this corridor as being at least in 4 dimensions. Surely you can do that by now. All right, at least in 3. That it's not just on each side. The corridor is surrounded like in a sphere, except the sphere would be, to have to use 3D descriptions, would be like an infinite long hot dog. And this quiet corridor is going down the middle, but there are rooms everywhere. And the rooms are filled, they're wired up, and filled with the ordinary, frantic, noisy activity of human consciousness. Now, the individual people working at that level, there's only a few rooms in which they live, as you should know by now. You better know by now. To left your own devices, but now you can see I think the same things over and over and over. Even when I'm thinking about that, I should think of new things. I've been thinking that for 30 years. Or me thinking about I shouldn't worry so much about my apparent flaws. In fact, I should quit even worrying about me worrying about it. But I have been thinking that for at least the last 20 years since I read it in a book by somebody. This rebirth, or this production of what amounts to a whole new brain, a whole new mind, it is the yellow circuit extended. It will be a new circuit, as I mentioned to you, and I could go ahead now and rename it, because in a sense it's not really the yellow circuit anymore. But this corridor is what many of you now can experience some of. I want to give you another picture for you to use it in a certain way. As you will find, those of you who can do it some now, you'll find it begins to extend, that there are long periods of time that you can walk around and be conscious, just do a number of ordinary things with almost no internal noise. You're not in some state of stupor. You're not going around with a halo. People do not necessarily notice what's going on with you. You can function, and internally it is just almost dead. And I don't mean feeling. I'm talking about the noise and the voices. But in this quiet corridor, what you can do is you can open the door to these rooms where all the frantic and noisy activity that is yours. You can open them, and you can look in, you can observe, you can listen, and of course it's trying to get to the reality of neuralizing, but you can do it without going inside. But as long as you're trapped in the rooms, as long as you don't know about this quiet corridor, then you are in the room. That's why everyone takes the noise as being themselves. You can't get out of the room. And to hear some notion for somebody to show up, or reading a book that someone says, listen, what you appears to be you, your kind of false personality, that's not you. And it'll strike many, many people as, wow, hey. And they read right quick, they won't turn the page, well, now what? And the person that said it, they don't have any now what. Just life is like that much information. That's been floating around for thousands of years, and they can dress it up in your clothes and your terminology. But they say the noise or this kind of thing that seems to be you. You know, it just seems to be you, and you say, yeah, it ain't you. Wow, okay, turn the page, now what? That's it. Which has always served a purpose. But it will not serve the purpose of you getting any further, because as long as you are living in the rooms, the information is floating around that somebody say, wait a minute, do you realize we're all trapped in this room, or maybe a whole series of rooms, and all this noise and all this activity going on? It's not really us. Shakespeare, hey, we're players on a stage. We're puppets on a string. Wow, really? How do we get out? Well, I've told you all I know. I just sense that we're trapped here and this is not us. Wow. If you can't get out of the room, then by saying that the noise and the activity is not you, even though it may be impressive in some way, and even though it may strike people as this has some kind of very extraordinary ring of validity. But if you can't get out, it's meaningless. The specific practical bit that I wanted to point out about this quiet corridor, and it is a very valid description. Let me remind you, I don't do this for poetic reasons, is there still seems to be, for a long time with people, I'm quite aware of this, that even though when I say that you have no problems, that the problems are ordinary consciousness, that the noise is not you, even after you begin to see some of that on your own, it is not a matter of immediately they're all gone. Nor should it be. It's not that you're doing anything incorrect, because you can continue to learn from it. There's more to be learned there in a sense than there is listening to me. You just have to find out the method. When you can find yourself being able, if you'll just use this picture that I'm painting for you, that you are just in a quiet corridor, And when you're not doing anything else, or when it strikes you, when it just seems to be appropriate, you can open a door, and I'm just going to use everyday descriptions now, so I'm not going to try to play with words. It's like you can open a door and look back in some of your great old daydreams. You know, some sexual fear you had, how you think people look at you, these running complaints that you feel like there is an absolutely unending, inexplicable battle between you and your parents or one of your parents. Is you can open the door and you can listen to it. You can look at the pictures, you can see it going on. What it amounts to is you're looking, using ordinary terminology, it's getting away from your everyday daydreams, that you can stand outside the room and they continue to go on, and you can learn from it without getting involved. And you can close the door, and as it were, you can look off and you can neuralize, and you can open it back, and it's still running. Or you can make them back up. Of course, normally you don't have to do that because the repertoire of what's going on in each room is very limited. It runs on, and it's as though you can go back and play with fire and never even get your hands singed. That you have access to this past activity of line level consciousness without becoming involved in it. And I am not trying to insinuate by any means that that is the ultimate answer, or that in some way you've got to go back and figure out what happened in this apparent estrangement between you and your mother. It's all meaningless, except it is the basis of your hardwired system. And you can go back and look at it. It's not always a matter of immediately learning something, but it will also produce a kind of strength that you'll find out, I can open the door to things I just thought, it's just been one of my darkest secrets, my hatred of my mother, or my fear that someday I'm just suddenly going to jump up and shave my legs and start dressing up like a woman. That you can just simply open the door and it's going on, and you can, and sometimes you don't get anything, but it develops a kind of strength that you find out, I can close the door and it don't mean shit, as we say in the religious trade. And later you can be sitting around or driving your car, or just laying in before you go to sleep or in the morning, and you can open up the door and it's still going on. You can listen, you can look. I'm just giving you one description, although it is valid. It produces a kind of strength, and plus, and still enough of you are in a certain place that it will also produce a string of at least small level continuing shocks that you can do this. But you can't do it through trickery, you can't do it through drugs, you can't do it through giving some kind of verbal allegiance to me or someone else. But you can be literally conscious up here in the brain in areas that are not now conscious, and when you do it, they are not fed by the activities in those rooms. And you can lay there in bed, or you can sit right here, and you can be as conscious as anyone else, to say the very least. And for all intents and purposes, inside you're staying in a quiet corridor, because it's not just, of course, your internal noise and frantic activity in the rooms, it's how it's apparently connected with the frantic, noisy activity of apparently out there, that is, other people. And if somebody says something that inflames and increases the activity in one of your rooms, you understand that that's not me, I'm not tied up with it. You can feel, all you got to do is just stand there and open the door, and you hear in your room somebody really a nude railing against what somebody else has said from one of their rooms. But you can close it, you can open the door, yeah, it's just, I knew that. I knew that's exactly what would be going on as soon as they said, blah, 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 or here's what I think about some group of people, or here's what I think about you. It's like you hear it, you can open the door, yep. As you know, I'm not saying all this to just get a laugh or a chuckle. I'm giving you a fair description to try and encourage you and to give you something to step on, something to hold on to, but that is exactly, or that is a valid description. But you can stand in a place that is quiet, and it is right up here, and it's not simply mysticism, it's not simply a religious fever of some kind. It's a part of the brain that would have never been activated. And it is a part of the brain that the normal activity of human life did not produce. So it is not built upon it. And it can be conscious, and it's as though it were standing in a quiet corridor, but it's still, you can hear all the noise. Anytime you don't have to really open the door. You just, internally, you don't have to do this. I'm doing it so that you can physically see. You can do like this. Yeah, that's, you know the door. You may even start putting your name on it. That's my sexual fear door, or that's my just general fear of being alive. That's my fear of death door. You know, it's still there. But you can actually open the door without getting entangled in it, and you can listen, you can look, and you can close the door. You can go back and check, and you can open it back up. But also remember, it is in a particular part of the perceivable universe, which is the whole universe. It is a flying castle. It is this huge castle. I shouldn't have to say huge if I'm telling you the truth. It's the size of the universe, and it is sailing. And the majority of the areas of human perception inside this castle are noisy and frantic. But there are areas, not only in your nervous system, but there are areas in the castle mechanically, that is, other parts of life's body, that are not noisy and frantic. I have a new rhetorical question for you. And until I say it out loud, I'm not sure whether I'm going to say anything else or leave it at that. And I'm not sure of the necessity of me having pointed that out. Roll the tape back and cut that out. I want you to neuralize this. When it comes to the apparently non-physical energy transformation via words between people, that is absolutely energy transfer. It is as much of a food chain as eating, defecating, recycling physical food energy that all of you surely by now have some periodic glimpse of. Human speech, when you get to the one area of this flying castle, that is the level of consciousness of humanity, it becomes of more and more importance, as I've tried to get you to see, that speech now, say in our day and time, and much of the planet now, that the transfer of energy via the spoken word is of more importance than what people are apparently doing physically. And I questioned you for you to pursue. In your particular case, does energy transfer via the spoken word seem to have the greatest effect on you in the red, the blue, or the yellow circuitry? We're going to have the readings now of, I've selected some more of the papers that I have put into the permanent group file from here. We've got some that have come down from some of the other cities. We're going to have those read.